Serious people with nightmare siblings, what's the most fricked up thing they ever did? My brother's half brothers. They have the same father, but I have a different father, are a bit older than me. One day they were both sitting on our dock fishing. The oldest brother picked up a knife out of the tackle box. They were about 12. It was a brand new knife of some kind, specifically for killing or cooking fish or something. He looks at my other brother and goes, I wonder how sharp this knife is, and without hesitation he literally stabbed it into the top of the middle brother's thigh. Totally casual about it, like no big deal, that the knife was in deep enough to stand upright by itself. Swapped my father's medication for aspirin after father's heart surgery. He pushed me into the sliding glass door because I didn't know if the phone had rung or not. After about 5 minutes of him yelling about the phone, I snapped and said, just leave me the duck alone. And his response was to shove me, cracked the glass and everything. For reference, I was 12 and he was 23. Oh my god. Did you tell your parents? My dad was home at the time. Kicked my brother out. Only lasted about a week. My brother is extremely mentally ill, and he doesn't have a short fuse. He has no fuse. So, when he tripped, and my sister laughed at him, he charged at her with a knife. Threw firecrackers in my bed while I was asleep in it. Strangled me with a PS2 controller cord. Stole pawned my belongings on a semi-regular basis. Annoy our dog in front of me with no apparent reason. And so on. I'm seeing some pretty ducked up stuff on here, and my stories don't really compare, but I have a few things. For one, my older brother gets bust really easily and once flipped over a glass table in our living room. Whole thing shattered, and I cut my foot. Don't remember what he was mad about, since I was only around 4 or 5, but he must have been in his early teens at that point. Parents replaced it with custom fitted glass, which was pretty expensive apparently. He also taped a knife to my parents' door once, which everyone assumed was a threat. He insisted he wasn't going to do anything, just wanted to scare them. He was at least 20 at the time. A lot of the other things I can think of are verbal, where he'll scream at people for tiny, insignificant things. He's rarely physically violent. It's just that he'll break your shit when you're not around and indirectly threaten you, ignore you for weeks at a time, etc. Everyone has to constantly walk on eggshells around him because of how explosive he is, and I can thank him for how sensitive and quiet I am. He threw a fit and broke his phone when my parents didn't give him money for cigarettes and beer. He was 36 at that time. He constantly cheated his then fiancée out of money, enabled his 2 kids from a previous marriage to be awful kids, then had 2 more he cold and raised with another woman. He's as abusive as our father, so I cut him out of my life as soon as I turned 18. My brother attempted to ruin my life because I wouldn't stay quiet about our father being a P. He rallied the family to harass me into silence. My older brother once sat on me and mummified me with duct tape and then left me outside in 30-degree weather while he played PS2 with headphones on. He taped my hands and feet together first, and then the rest of me. I couldn't even fight back. I was left that way until our mom got home a few hours later and grounded the shit out of him. While my mom was dying of lung cancer, unable to move, and in horrible pain, my junkie brother stole all of her opioid bandages. She even kept them under her pillow, so none could have access to them. He would bend to kiss her and sneak his hand under to grab them. My sister is a convicted pedophile who used to sexually abuse our grandparents' foster children. She also sexually abused me and our cousins. She convinced our dad to sign for a car loan for her when she was in her early 20s because she had already trashed her credit. She never paid any of it, and he was already struggling financially. It sent into a downward spiral that ultimately ended in his death from a drug overdose years later, after being rendered homeless. She has always loved to date gang members, one of whom was implicated in the murder of her cousin. We share a father, but have different mothers. She was subsequently caught sleeping with multiple police officers to get information on the case, to keep her murdering boyfriend out of jail. In that same murder spree, to innocent people who had nothing to do with the gangs involved, were executed after begging for their lives. They had just both happened to walk past at the wrong time. She still doesn't think her now ex-boyfriend should be in jail. Happily he was convicted and won't be getting out of jail in this lifetime. She got married a few years later, a few months after the wedding. On Christmas Day, she tells her new husband, who, by all accounts, was actually a decent guy, that she is going out for milk or something, and she never comes back. When our father was in the hospital, and I was having to have him taken off life support, she kept telling everyone she was on her way. Please wait for her. I did. For 2 days. Turned out she lied. Never left her house about 8 hours away, and thought it was hilarious she made us all wait. This is all on top of the mental and emotional abuse I suffered at her hands for years. She broke things I cared about, would keep me awake, and hit me with belts and BBQ tools if I fell asleep for days at a time. I'm pretty sure she killed my grandparents' dog. She still posts on FB occasionally. From what I hear, after what happened with my dad, I sent her a message that I hoped she died alone, and blocked her on everything. She is a monster. Can't decide which was worse. Pretending to be pregnant. She was a teenager at the time, the night before my siblings' big school exam finals, my 21st birthday presumably, because the attention wasn't on her. As a school dropout with no job at the time, or the time she stole my aunt's money and house after she died. Then tried to claim that there was no money. The council took the house back because we owed a load of tax. My mother, massive enabler who has never said no to her in her life, finally admitted to signing some legal documents which allowed her to do all of this. My other siblings, and I found bank statements afterwards. Scary thing is, I think she believes her own lies. She had a nice job working for the FBI. Her job was to do background checks on people in need of security clearance. There was a guy she knew and liked, a cruise ship captain, needed to renew his clearance. To try to get him pissed at his girlfriend, my sister added items to his girlfriend's criminal record. Since it was a renewal, the guy escalated it, and what my sister did was discovered. She was convicted and sent to federal prison for a year. What really screwed it up was she didn't tell her kids, they were in their late teens and early 20s, that she had court issues. So they came home from school to an answering machine saying, "Mommy can't make dinner tonight because she'll be in prison for a while." Used my own child to hurt me. My parents would babysit my young son while I was working, and my older adult brother was there. He has always hated me and done everything in his power to hurt me because I was the baby of the family. My son was around 5-6 years old, and I caught him verbally impressing onto my child ideas of weird fetishes, like he was trying to corrupt him mentally to hurt me. Removed him from that situation as soon as I figured out what he was doing. I hate my brother. He has always done mean things to me my whole life. I swear he's a sociopath. I've got nothing on some folks here, but she poisoned my cat, threw out all my food while I was selling my belongings on eBay to pay rent, because I was too fat, and would use my things without asking, sometimes using all of my consumables, and then saying to my wife, "Don't worry, he's got money." I really don't think she understood I was literally recycling bottles and cans to make rent, and she would steal the bill money I was saving for phone internet rent without a second thought and claim to our landlord I never paid her. The poisoning ended up being the last straw, and we had to put him in an oxygen tent and he needed his stomach pumped etc. When it was all said and done, we were out of pocket all of our savings that we had recently started the home purchasing process and needed the cash to close. Instead, we couldn't afford closing costs, and we ended up forfeiting all the money we had put into the process before that point, and had to deal with the broker wanting to sue us. So now I make it a point to never announce my visits to family. She's 60+ minutes away from most of them, so she doesn't have time to show up. If I see her car parked at the relative's house I'm visiting, I will just drive away rather than risk engaging with her again. I was maybe 8 or 9 when this happened. For context, my dad was deployed and my mom was working, so my brother had to babysit me. My brother was around 16 at the time. As soon as my mom left, He shoved me into a closet and locked me inside for 6 or so hours. I was scared of the dark and couldn't reach the light string. He didn't let me out to use the bathroom or eat anything. So I ended up going on myself and sitting in the dark until my mom came home. She told me that he was asleep in his room when she got home. Needless to say, I really ducking hate him. He's still an awful person, by the way. It's a toss-up really between 3 things my brother has done. I found out my brother and his wife were not separated and getting a divorce. Something he'd been telling the whole family for over a year and she knew nothing about until I inadvertently said something to her. B, his posting on Facebook that my mother had passed away just to get sympathy likes. She was sick, but not yet dead, and I had to wake up and handle the massive freak out from relatives and friends. He then claimed he hadn't known it would be taken that way, even though people were sending him public condolences and talking about her in the past tense. C, got confirmation from someone who knows him really well that he lied about having cancer at one point. Again, pretty sure that was for the sympathy and likes. There's a lot more, and enough for a shit show times 10, but those are just the 3 biggest that impacted me and or I just can't forgive him for. He also lied about having hurt his back so he couldn't come to our mother's funeral. Only 2 weeks later he posted photos of himself online holding his contractor's license, bragging about the jobs he was doing. He's never answered me on what miracle operation or treatment did he get to cure his bad back so fast, and hasn't spoken to me since that day. Nothing of value has been lost. He married a girl. Wedding had a lot of ducks to our family in it, but aside from those, announced at the wedding, we are pregnant. Turned out, about 4 months at that point, they had the baby. 1 month later he announces, "It's too much. She's a bitch. I can't take this. I'm leaving and going to move in with a friend from work." Turns out friend from work is 8 months pregnant at this point with his next kid. By some miracle he doesn't leave that girl when the baby is born, but gets her pregnant again about as soon as is possible. I don't know if she wises up or something else at that point, but baby mama kicks him out then. Now he lives in my parents' basement, refuses to drive an hour to see his kids. Cause what good is that? One of those kids he spent their first month of life with and has seen about a dozen times since. The second I think he spent the entire first, call it, 10 months of their life together till mommy was knocked up again and hasn't seen since. And the third he'd never seen. The wedding ducks part caught my attention. Care to give some examples? Sure. Hopefully this example is telling enough. Absolutely no children was on the invitation, so he made me leave my 6-month-old, his only niece, at home. That was a bit upsetting, but then he got pissed when I told him I wasn't bringing my wife who breastfed the child, was her only source of food at that point. See, the wedding was in the middle of nowhere, 5-hour drive from my home. His mastermind argument was you should rent a hotel room, leave the baby in there, and she wife can just go back and forth and feed her as required. Oh, you can get a babysitter to stay in the hotel room. Then they allowed the maid of honor to bring her baby to the ceremony. Cause what was she gonna do? Leave a 3-month-old at home? To be very clear, go ahead, have a no child policy. That is perfectly fine and good, but don't expect those with children to all love it. And don't expect there won't be some guests who opt out of coming as a result. Do not turn them into a bad guy in the same way you don't want them to turn you into a bad guy for not allowing children. And for duck's sake, don't make selective exceptions to your rule or you just look like a cunt. My younger sister grabbed the wheel while I was driving, and we almost went into a ditch. I asked her why she did that. She told me she wanted to see my reaction. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.